"Auntie Amina, what are you doing? My mummy told me not to allow anybody to touch my manhood," little Kwame said, as Auntie Amina held his joystick warmly and started playing with it. "I will tell my mum when I go home," he said. "Don't worry, Kwame. You will get to love this game very soon," she replied. Kwame's mum Eliza was a single mother who ran a small business selling baked cake and moi in the local Badagry market. She would leave the house after bathing Kwame and sending him off to school. From early morning until late at night, she worked very hard every day trying to provide for her only child. Kwame's school, St. Benedict Primary School, was only a 10-minute walk from their home. His day would end at 2 p.m, but he would stay all alone at home with no one to play with or talk to. His poor mother had little or no time to spend with him at home. The only time Kwame would be able to see his mum was around 7 or 8 p.m, or sometimes even later at night. Mama Kwame was not happy that her son was not having the fun other kids in the neighbourhood were having. She started getting worried over Kwame's situation. One fateful evening, Kwame's mother, Eliza, noticed how tired, quiet and upset he seemed. She tried asking him about his day, but Kwame just said, "Nothing happened, Mama." She could see that something was wrong, but she didn't know how to help. That night she went to bed with her mind filled with pain and regret. She knew she had neglected her child of so much attention. And before she knew it, little drops of tears dropped down her cheeks. The next morning she decided to speak to their neighbour, Amina, a tall, beautiful, dark-skinned lady who lived in the house next door. Auntie Amina was a warm-hearted, pretty lady in her mid-20s, known for always wearing skimpy dresses around the estate neighbourhood. She carried an irresistible beauty and curves that attracted all types of men to her. She was a proper Gen Z baddie, in her mid-20s married to a week-old man. She loved to go out with all type of men in town. On weekends, different men trooped in and out of her house. One evening, Eliza spoke to Amina after closing her shop. "Amina, I've been worried about Kwame. I work long hours at the market, and I can't always be there for him after school. Would you mind looking after him for a few hours each afternoon until we come back?" Amina smiled kindly. "Of course, Eliza, I don't mind at all. Kwame is a good boy. I'll make sure he's well taken care of." That evening, Amina walked home with Eliza, gisting and talking about little Kwame. There was this strange eagerness Amina had building up in her to spend time with Kwame. She had always had some secret plans for Kwame, and finally she has the opportunity to explore her fetish games with him. Eliza was relieved and very happy. At last her son will be getting some attention he needs. In her eyes, Amina had a warm and caring heart, but she didn't know a greater danger posed ahead. Kwame always liked Amina, and he enjoyed listening to her stories when she sometimes visited his mum at the market. He enjoyed the tales of the giant and the monster story Auntie Amina fondly told him. And maybe with her around, he wouldn't feel so lonely and bored, he thought to himself. That afternoon, Kwame walked to Auntie Amina's house. It was a small, cozy house with a flower garden in the front yard. As he walked in, he heard the sound of buzzing jazz music, and on the left corner of the room, Amina was already waiting, sitting in a rocking chair by the window. "Come on in, Kwame," she called out in her usual cheerful tone. "I've made some tea and biscuits for you. How about we watch a movie together?" she asked. As Kwame walked in, he felt a little better at the thought of spending time with her. It wasn't his home, but Auntie Amina's house always felt welcoming. She had a small TV in the living room, and the air smelled like fresh tea and baked goods. Kwame sat down beside her, feeling a bit of warmth in his chest. For the first time in a while, he didn't feel so alone. Amina gave him some foreign biscuits, the type Kwame mostly ate on Christmas Day. It was a fresh and new chapter for Kwame. All his worries of boredom and loneliness was finally over. So he thought to himself, In the beginning, Kwame enjoyed his afternoons at Amina's house. She would often tell him fascinating stories about her childhood, and they would watch cartoons together, laughing at the funny characters on TV. She always had something for him to do. Amina was a tailor who worked from home most times. Most times her customers would come down to her house and pick up their dresses. She had all the time in the world to spend with Kwame. But as the weeks went on, Amina began to suggest things that Kwame didn't quite understand. She would call him into her living room and ask, "Kwame, would you like to play a special game? Just for us, no one else knows about it." Her voice was soft and inviting, like a secret only they shared. Kwame would innocently agree. This was one of the first baits Kwame fell for. Unknowingly to him that he was just about to start a journey that would affect his childhood. At first, Kwame was curious. He had never played any special games with anyone before. Auntie Amina would sit him down on the couch, put on a movie, and then ask him to do strange things like touch the screen during certain parts of the movie, or act out scenes in a way that felt weird to him. She said, "This will help you get stronger. It's something everyone should know about." Little Kwame didn't understand what she meant by that, but he trusted Auntie Amina. One afternoon, as they sat on the couch, Auntie Amina asked him to come closer. "Come on, Kwame. I want to teach you a very important thing today, something that will make you special." She gently placed her hand on his arm and smiled. "You'll understand when you're older, but for now, just trust me." Kwame felt uneasy. Something about her touch felt different this time. He hadn't noticed it before, but now it seemed too much. Amina held Kwame's joystick with her 2 fingers. As she started playing with it, his heart began to race. But he didn't know how to tell her to stop. "What's this game called?" he asked, his voice shaky. "Please stop it. I prefer my PS5 game. Please stop, Auntie Amina." Auntie Amina didn't answer immediately. She just smiled, her eyes glinting in a way that made Kwame nervous. She patted the space beside her on the couch. "It's just a game between us. No one else will know, and I'll teach you something new, something important. You can't tell anyone about it, okay? If you promise to keep our little secret, I promise to buy you your favorite biscuits," Amina said gently, softly rubbing Kwame's head. Kwame nodded, unsure of what was going on. Suddenly, a loud knock at the door interrupted them. Amina looked surprised because she wasn't expecting any visitor, so she ignored as she kissed Kwame's and tried to touch him further. Another knock came again, louder this time. Auntie Amina quickly stood up and walked to the door, her face changing from a soft smile to something more tense. But as Amina opened the door, there was nobody there. She returned back to the living room to join Kwame. "Don't worry about it, Kwame, it's just the 2 of us here," she said quickly, her voice too cheerful. "Let's continue with our game. Come sit here." At this point, Kwame wanted to leave, but before he could stand up, Auntie Amina placed her hand on his shoulder, her grip firmer than before. "Kwame, stay with me. We're not done yet," she said, her voice now low and almost threatening. Her eyes, once jovial, now felt cold and calculating. Kwame felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He knew something was wrong. He tried to pull away, but her hand tightened. "Auntie Amina, I want to go home," Kwame said, his voice trembling. "You don't need to go anywhere, Kwame. You're here because you need to learn something. Don't you want to be special? I'm only helping you." As he scanned the house with his eyes, the door was too far away, and Auntie Amina's grip was strong. He had never felt so afraid in his life. His mind raced. Should he scream for help? Should he run? But where could he go? No one was home. These were the thoughts running through his mind. Before he could decide what to do, there was another knock at the door. This time, It wasn't a regular knock. It was fast and urgent. 3 sharp bangs that seemed to shake the whole house. Auntie Amina hesitated, looking toward the door again. Then, her face twisted into a deep scowl, and she let go of Kwame's shoulder. "Stay here," she hissed, her voice sharp. Kwame didn't need to be told twice. He bolted from the bed, his feet pounding the floor as he ran toward the back door. He didn't know who was at the front, but he needed to get away from Auntie Amina. She was not the same person he had known before. The warmth, the kindness. They were gone. Kwame reached the back door and flung it open, running into the alley behind the house. His heart was pounding in his chest. He could hear Auntie Amina shouting at him from inside, but he didn't look back. He didn't stop running until he reached the familiar street where his school was, the same street he walked down every day. He looked around to make sure no one was following him. Kwame ran down the street, his heart still racing, unsure of what had just happened. But he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't go back to Auntie Amina's house again. As he ran, he passed the old Abuja Junction, where a group of young boys often played football. Today, they were too busy with their own game to notice him. Kwame could barely hear their laughter over the pounding of his feet on the concrete. Kwame glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see Auntie Amina chasing after him. But the street was quiet, too quiet. He was alone, and that made him feel even more scared. He walked toward a small bench near the school, sitting down to catch his breath. Kwame's walk home felt longer than usual. Every step he took felt heavier, like the weight of the world was pressing down on his shoulders. As Kwame arrived home, he met the usual empty and lonely house, but at least he felt the relief of being away from Auntie Amina. At least now he felt safe. A few moments later, Kwame heard a quiet squeaking sound from the kitchen. As he turned his back, to his greatest surprise, it was Auntie Amina standing at the kitchen entrance with a long whip. Kwame stood still, trying to decide whether to speak or remain silent. Auntie Amina's gaze was intense. I just needed some air," Kwame muttered, his voice trembling. Auntie Amina took a step closer, her eyes softening. "I understand, Kwame. You've been through a lot. But you know I'm here for you, right? I just want to help you." Kwame nodded fearfully. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. "Where's your husband, Auntie Amina? What happened to him?" Kwame finally summoned the courage to ask, trying to break the silence. Her expression flickered for a moment. "You must be hungry after all the running around you've done," she replied, trying to avoid the question. Kwame's stomach growled at the mention of food, but his instincts told him to be cautious. "I'm not hungry. I think I'll just go inside and rest," he said. Auntie Amina's smile faltered, but only for a moment. "All right, Kwame, but remember, you can always talk to me. You're not alone." Kwame nodded and quickly walked past her, not daring to look back. But his mind was racing. What had happened to Auntie Amina? Where had the warmth gone? Why was she acting so strange? As Kwame walked into his room, he heard the familiar sound of his mother's voice from the back room. "Kwame, is that you?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he went straight to his room, locked the door behind him, and sat on the edge of his bed. His thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and fear. Auntie Amina's odd behavior, it all felt connected somehow, but he couldn't put the pieces together. Kwame pulled out his phone, thinking about calling Chijioke, his best friend from school. But he paused, unsure of how to explain everything. How could he tell Chijioke about the things he had seen and heard? Who would believe him? Just as he was about to put the phone down, he saw a message from Chijioke pop up on his screen. "Kwame, are you okay? You've been acting strange at school. Did something happen?" Kwame's heart raced as he read the message. Chijioke had noticed. He had seen through the quietness, the fear that Kwame had tried so hard to hide. Chijioke was also one of Amina's victims in the past, but this was something Kwame didn't know about. He hesitated for a moment before typing his reply. I don't know, Chioke. Auntie Amina has been touching me in some funny ways and I don't know what to do. I'm scared. Before he could finish his thought, his mum called out his name, loud. Kwame, please come to the kitchen. I need to talk to you. Kwame walked toward the kitchen, wondering if his life was about to change forever. His heart pounding as he walked toward the kitchen, wondering what his mum wanted to talk about. As he entered the kitchen, he saw his mother standing by the counter, her back turned. The dim light from the single bulb hanging overhead cast long shadows across the room, making the space feel colder than usual. She was stirring something in a pot, but her movements seemed mechanical, like she wasn't really paying attention to what she was doing. Mama? Kwame asked, his voice trembling. She turned slowly, her face softening when she saw her son. But there was something in her eyes that made Kwame feel uneasy. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and her hands gripped the wooden spoon tighter than necessary. Kwame, sit down, she said, her voice calm but distant. Kwame obeyed, sitting at the small wooden table in the corner of the kitchen. His mind raced. His mother had never acted like this before. She was usually warm, kind, and full of life, but now she seemed different, distant, almost as if she were hiding something from him. Amma, what's going on? He asked again, his voice barely above a whisper. His mum took a deep breath before responding. Kwame, I need you to listen to me carefully. There's something I have to tell you, and it's not easy. Kwame's stomach tightened. His hands began to sweat as he clenched them in his lap. Whatever his mother was about to say, he knew it was going to change everything. Last night, she continued, her voice shaky, I received a call from the police. They've been investigating something that concerns us. Kwame's breath caught in his throat. The police? What could they possibly be investigating that involved him? Mama, what do you mean? What's going on? Kwame asked, his fear now rising. Mama Kwame swallowed hard before continuing. It's about Auntie Amina, and what happened between you two. Kwame's body froze. Auntie Amina? He could feel the blood drain from his face as the words echoed in his mind. What happened between us? I don't understand, Kwame said, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know all the details, she said, her eyes looking anywhere but at him. But the police have been watching her for a while. They believe she's been involved in child abuse, and they think it might involve you. You have been her most recent victim. Auntie Amina is under investigation, Kwame asked, his voice shaking. What does that mean for me? Elisa's face turned pale, and for a moment she looked like she was about to break down. I don't know, Kwame, but I want you to stay with me. I don't want you going anywhere near her. The police are coming soon to speak to us, and I need you to tell them everything you know. Tears dropped down her cheeks as she spoke to Kwame. She dragged little Kwame close and started apologizing. My son, I'm very sorry I have not been there for you as a mother. I can't believe I allowed an outsider take advantage of you, she said in a bitter tone. I will make sure she rot in jail. Just as she finished speaking, there was a loud bang on the door. Kwame's heart skipped a beat. He looked toward the door, his mind racing. Was it the police? Or was it Auntie Amina? Was she coming for him? Mama Kwame quickly moved to the door, her face filled with worry. She opened it just a crack and spoke in a low, urgent voice. Kwame couldn't hear the conversation, but he saw his mum's face change. Her eyes widened with shock, then narrowed with fear. The door swung open fully, and standing there, in the doorway, was the last person Kwame expected to see, Auntie Amina. Her face was pale and her clothes looked rumpled as though she had been running. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her eyes darting around the room. There was a strange, almost frantic energy in her movements. "Eliza," Auntie Amina said, her voice trembling. "They're looking for me. I need your help." Mama Kwame's face twisted in shock and fear as she stepped back, blocking the way. "Amina, what are you doing here? So after everything you did to my son, you still have the guts to come to my house? You're under investigation. The police, they'll soon arrest you and you will be locked up forever." "I don't have time to explain." Amina cut her off, her eyes wild. "They'll be here soon. They think I did something terrible. They're blaming me for things I didn't do." "Believe me, Eliza, I did not do anything to Kwame. I was only nice to him." As she tried to cover the truth with lies, her trembling voice gave her away. Kwame felt a chill run through him. The tension in the room was unbearable. Auntie Amina's voice was shaking with desperation, but there was something off in the way she spoke. Her eyes flicked to Kwame, and for the first time, he saw fear and desperation in the eyes of Auntie Amina. His mum stepped in front of Kwame, blocking his view of Auntie Amina. "You need to leave, Amina, now. And don't ever come anywhere close to my son ever again. Get out of my house now," she commanded. Just then, there was another knock at the door, louder and more forceful this time. Kwame's mum looked at the door with panic in her eyes. "It's the police," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're here." Amina went down on her knees and started begging Mama Kwame. "Please, Eliza, allow me use the back door. I swear I will never do this again. I don't know what came over me." Mama did not take it lightly with Amina. She held Amina firmly from preventing her escape. This time around, the knock on the door became a banging one that was so loud that it attracted the neighbours. As Kwame's mum opened the door, there was a tall and huge police detective standing in front of the door. He brought out his ID card and immediately introduced himself as Inspector Ibrahim of the Nigerian police. Kwame's mum ushered him in immediately. This time he was standing face to face with Auntie Amina. Quickie, the police officer, brought out his handcuffs and said, "You are under arrest for the sexual harassment of a minor by name Kwame. Anything you say or do will be used against you in the court of law." Immediately he put Auntie Amina in handcuffs and whisked her away. The neighbours gathered in surprise as Auntie Amina was put inside the police van and driven away. As the police van drove away, Mama Kwame became very curious of Amina's punishment. She didn't want her to evade justice. Amina was the type of lady who knew almost all the men in town. It was possible she might make a few calls and get away with the atrocities she had committed. Mama Kwame stopped a taxi and followed the police van to the station. As she walked in, she immediately requested to see the officer in charge. She was quickly ushered into the DPO's office. "Good evening, sir," she greeted. A dark-looking man in his 40s sitting on a small wooden chair replied, "Good evening, madam.
Sorry,
How can I be of help to
Please
you?"
have a seat.
As she sat
I am
down,
the mother of the little boy the lady molested.
continued. "You see, madam,
Mama,
this is a high-crime
Kwame
case,
stuttered
and I
for a
want you to
second
be
as she
rest
answered.
assured that the woman who did this to your son won't escape." He ended the assurances and conversations by advising Mama Kwame, "Look, madam," as he cleared his throat, "there are registered daycare agencies out there that can take good care of your child. Please don't take such chances of putting him in danger next time." "Thank you very much, sir. I'm going to register him in a daycare next week," she told him. Make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to watch more enchanting reality stories like this. Thank you for watching.